The first studio liked to use sound in The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson, and then when Technicolor in the early 1930s came out with the two-strip Technicolor process, which we'll talk about two-strip and three-strip later, he was one of the first ones to implement that. In 1937, he was one of the first, I guess. Walt Disney was really the first to use three-strip Technicolor in a feature film called God's Country and the Woman. And so he was up for using three-strip Technicolor, and he wanted to implement it in as many films as he could possibly use. Now that we know that Errol Flynn replaced James Cagney, and Errol Flynn in 1936 was cast as Robin Hood. Errol Flynn, a little bit on his backstory. He was born in 1909 to Australian parents on the island of Tasmania. He was known as the Tasmanian Devil. He was 6'2", 180 pounds, broad-shouldered, lean and muscular, an avid sportsman, and bronzed by the sun. He was described by David Niven, who was one of his best friends, as a magnificent specimen of the rampant male. And he was described by Jack Warner as he had mediocre talent, but to the Walter Mitty's of the world, he was all the heroes in one magnificent, sexy animal package. I mean, truer words were never spoken about anybody, for sure. But then his mother described him as a devil in boy's clothing. So he was just a mix of everything. He was a sexy Tasmanian devil. But he was expelled from school at age 17 because he could not handle tests, examinations, and grades. And he stated in his memoirs that his accomplishments were strictly physical. Flynn said, "I was bigger than most. I was an athlete." He was bigger than most in what? "I was an athlete, quite good at tennis, swimming, boxing, and ready to fight if picked on." Also, it was speculated that he was expelled from school because he tried to seduce the headmaster's daughter. And I think he did. And anyway, he was kicked out of school. And so before becoming a movie star, Flynn worked as a mail clerk for a shipping firm in Australia. He had a temporary position as cadet patrol officer in New Guinea until they found out he did not have a high school degree, so they fired him. He ran a tobacco plantation, and he was a great boxer, very successful boxer. And then he was discovered on an Australian beach in 1932 and cast in the film In the Wake of the Bounty, which was the very first film adaptation of the Mutiny on the Bounty story. And he played, is it Fletcher Christian?
Yep.
And he was kind of, like you might say, bitten by the acting bug. And he wanted to continue on this acting trip, but he wanted to go to London to do it. So he seduced an older rich woman, and in seducing her, he stole her jewels and resold them, so then he could get the money to move to London. And then he ended up in London, where he was hired by a theater company after convincing them he was an Australian movie star, which had some truth in it, but he also gave them a list of very phony credits of different theater credits that he had done, which was all a lie. But then he was soon cast in a minor murder mystery, Murder at Monte Carlo, at the Warner Brothers Teddington studio location in London. And after Jack Warner saw him in Murder at Monte Carlo in London, he was immediately instructed to report to the head studio in Burbank for Warner Brothers. And then on the boat over, he met his wife, Lily Demita, who would not pay him any attention on the boat. But once they got over to Hollywood and she found out that he was, a contract star for Warner Brothers, and then he started to pick up speed, she paid him all of the attention in the world, and they eventually married. So Flynn and Demita had a very volatile marriage. When Flynn showed up late to their 1-year anniversary, Demita broke a bottle of champagne over Flynn's head, and he punched her lights out, and he gave her a black eye.
Jeez.
And according to the Warner Brothers press machine, they had gotten in a car wreck because they said that Errol Flynn had swerved to miss like a dog on the road, and they had hit a tree or something, and that's how he got the head wound, and that's how she got, a black eye. And Olivia de Havilland was first cast opposite Flynn in Captain Blood, which was Warner's most successful film in that year, and by 1937, the two were cast once again together in Robin Hood. So de Havilland was cast in Robin Hood in 1937, and they had gone through several other female actresses, but de Havilland and Flynn were known as having such magnificent sexual chemistry on the screen, and they were so successful at the box office that they cast them again.
Yeah.
Olivia de Havilland was born in she was born in Tokyo, Japan in June of 1916, and so was her sister Joan Fontaine. So you know who Olivia de Havilland is because you've seen her in Gone with the Wind, and you've seen her in The Adventures of Robin Hood. Her sister Joan Fontaine was another movie star. Have you seen Hitchcock's Rebecca?
I have not. I
Okay.
did not realize that it's Olivia de Havilland in Gone with the Wind, but now that you say that, I know exactly who she is.
Well, that's okay. Well, and that's a whole different story how she got the role in Gone with the Wind,
Yeah.
because Gone with the Wind is not Warner Brothers, it's MGM Selznick International, and she was under contract to Warner Brothers. So anyway,
Oh, but I've seen her sister because she's in Gunga Din.
yes. So you've seen Joan Fontaine, and Joan Fontaine was in Gunga Din. She was in Hitchcock's Rebecca, Hitchcock's Suspicion. She was in.
She was in Ivanhoe.
Oh yes, she actually was in Ivanhoe. Good, Garrett. That's really good. But Olivia was the favored child,
Uh huh.
so she got to keep the de Havilland family name.
Oh.
As when Joan went and became a movie star, she had to use a different name, which I think was a family name, but I can't remember which it was. But anyway, Joan and Olivia were born in Tokyo in 1916. They were not twins. Olivia was born early in 1916. Joan was born later that year. And then their mother found out that their father was having an affair with their Japanese housekeeper. And so she divorced him and she took the girls to the United States, and he ended up marrying his geisha. So it's a little bit like Madame Butterfly, only she did not commit suicide in the end. She got her man. But Olivia and Joan's mother did not get her man. They settled in Saratoga, California, and like I said, they both took an interest in drama in high school.
Uh huh.
And so right after Olivia graduated from high school, she was noticed by Max Reinhardt's assistant in the Saratoga Community Theater's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And so she was put into A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Hollywood Bowl, produced by Max Reinhardt, as the understudy to Hermia. And then that's how she got her contract to Warner Brothers, because then Warner Brothers bought out that production and they bought out Olivia because they were also impressed with Olivia's performance in that. So from their first meeting, it was evident that Olivia de Havilland and Errol Flynn had chemistry. Jack Warner stated that together these two amateurs set the screen on fire and sent a memo to Wallace saying that we must insist on using de Havilland, as at the time they were also considering Anita Louise, who was another Warner's contract star. Flynn recalled that during the making of Captain Blood, I had grown very fond of Olivia de Havilland. By the time we made The Charge of the Light Brigade, I was sure I was in love with her. So this is according to an interview that Olivia de Havilland gave with UCLA in the late 90s. And she said their first meeting was a silent costume test to see how they would look together. She said she saw him and was immediately struck dumb. A few weeks after the test, Flynn and de Havilland were brought together again to work on scenes together to see if they had any chemistry. And she said that now this is kind of funny, because she said after their test to see if they had any chemistry, they walked from this giant empty soundstage to the commissary together to have lunch. And he got his tray before she did, and he went and he sat down on a table, and then she got her tray. She was in line right behind him, but she looked over where he was sitting, and he had an empty seat next to him, but she thought, I can't go sit next to him because he would think I'm bold. She sat by herself. I don't exactly understand that, but that's part of, 1936, how you acted in 1936. Anyway, once they were finished eating, they both put their trays back at the same time. So she said they walked back to the soundstage together. And she said that Flynn asked her a question that nobody else had asked her in her life. He said, "What do you want out of life?" And she said, because she was Olivia de Havilland and she was very intelligent and very perfect in many ways, she said, "I would like respect for difficult work well done." And then she asked him the same question, and he said, "I want success." And in this interview, she said that she thought that he meant fame and riches, which is what he got, but he was never considered a serious actor, which is, what he wanted really out of his career. De Havilland and Flynn grew close while on location shooting in Chico, California, but their relationship was never consummated because Olivia de Havilland was such a lady. She did not want to consummate their relationship because he was married to Lily Demita. And also, women in Hollywood knew to steer clear of Lily Demita because she was very possessive of Flynn. Flynn stated that he said, "Lily was so violently jealous that I suppose she loved me. With my wandering eye, did nothing to help her overcome her fits of possessiveness. I felt trapped, even asphyxiated by her possessiveness. I had to get away from her. Her bedroom art and her cooking were not good enough. All around me, the whole world beckoned." So then Flynn continuously promised her that Lily Demitez and his relationship were puttering out, and it wouldn't go on for very long. And he kept promising and promising and promising, and nothing ever happened of that, but she would not sleep with him as long as he was married to Demeta. And she said, another quote, "Yes, we did fall in love, and I believe that this is evident in the screen chemistry between us, but circumstances at the time prevented the relationship going further. I have not talked about it a great deal, but the relationship was not consummated. Chemistry was there, though. It was there. I didn't reject him. You know, I was also very attracted to him. But I said that nothing could happen while he was still with Lily. I said that he had to resolve things with Lily first, but you know he never did. I think he was in deep thrall to her in some way. He did not leave her then, and he never approached me in that way again. So nothing did ever happen between us. But this is the funny part, because Flynn kept promising to seek out a romantic relationship with de Havilland, but never did. She recounted the following of attempting to get a little revenge on Flynn. And this is the quote by de Havilland. She said, "I thought, well, I'm going to torture Errol Flynn. And so we had one kissing scene, which I look forward to with great delight. I remember I blew every take, at least 6, maybe 7, maybe 8, and we had to kiss all over again. And Errol Flynn got really rather uncomfortable. And he had, if I may say so, a little trouble with his tights."
How many marriages in Hollywood do you think would have been saved if they had intimacy directors back then?
Oh, for sure. Well, and even Michael Curtiz, like, he wasn't a great intimacy director. He was like a kind of a headstrong bull in a china shop. And in that kissing scene, apparently Flynn was not taking her hard enough and like kissing her hard enough. And so Michael Curtiz said, "Break a rib if you have to," because he wouldn't take her as hard as he wanted to. But then again, he was having problems with his tights. So,
And it's
he
also
couldn't press
like
up against her anyway.
it's also the studio system where if there is like real sexual chemistry between the leads, it helps sell their film because I mean they would set up relationships between the leads all the time, like in the press and things like that. Like if they could, the public wanted to see romantic leads dating, and so it's I mean it ends up being really toxic and like not, as we know, not something that's good. But you know, in that time, it's what they were encouraging for sure.
Well, on all of the press machines, that's what they write about. So anyway, the cast also included the following people. Claude Rains as the tyrannical Saxon oppressor, Prince John. Basil Rathbone as Sir Guy of Gisborne. Patrick Knowles as Will Scarlet. Ian Hunter as King Richard the Lionhearted. Eugene Pallett as Friar Tuck. Alan Hale as Little John. Do you know what Alan Hale Jr., his son, was in?
No, I don't.
He was the skipper on Gilligan's Island.
Wow.
And then Una O'Connor is Bess, and Una O'Connor is one of my favorites. I wish she was my spirit animal. Well, she is my spirit animal now.
She is a kick. She's a hoot in this movie. She just is perfect.
I feel like she like snorted cocaine before each take and was like, "All right, I'm ready.
Honestly,
let's go."
Yeah, man.
But a little bit about Claude Rains. Claude Rains had gotten his start in Universal in 1933 in The Invisible Man. So when they started shooting Robin Hood in 1937, he had a 1-year contract with Warner Brothers stipulating that he would make 4 films for them, and each one was a success, so that his contract was extended, and he stayed pretty much at Warner Brothers throughout his entire career. When slated to play Prince John, Rains wasn't sure how to approach the part. But when he learned that he would be wearing a rust-colored, heavily banged page boy bob, he confided in his daughter that all the henna, ermine, and brocade inspired him to play the prince as tacitly homosexual, which I think is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, like his costume is outlandish. I mean, that what a take by him to go that way. And like, I mean, obviously playing, you know, closeted or outlandish homosexual in 1938 is different than it is now. It's not overt, but like now, if I were to go back and watch it, I'm sure there are things that are colored there that I would notice, because I didn't know that watching that first time.
And I feel like Moira Rose wore his costumes in at least several of the episodes of Schitt's Creek, you know, Catherine O'Hara. But Roddy McDowall always believed that Rains' performance was based on the stylized voice and mannerisms of Warner's contract actress Bette Davis. When McDowall confessed his idea to Rains years later, Rains merely answered with an enigmatic smile. So, more or less, he based his performance on Bette Davis, which I think is absolutely hilarious. But then David Niven, we both know who David Niven is. Everyone loves David Niven. Was supposed to play Will Scarlet.